post these on our YouTube site and also on the NEMSIS website for you to review or go back over if there's a portion that you missed or if you weren't able to catch all the detail on the first time around. So those are available on our YouTube site and also on the website. There we go. Everybody should be able to see the agenda. We're going to go ahead and start we've got a long list of things to cover today, so we'll try and keep things moving along at a pretty good pace. Feel free to use your chat feature if you have a question or to unmute your microphone and ask as we go along. We're happy to take those questions and comments throughout the call. We'll go ahead and start with Bridget. She's going to talk to us for a minute about the annual meeting coming up.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everybody had a great weekend and hopefully an extra day off of work. Wanted to let you guys know that we are pretty much set and contract is in the process of getting signed for the next annual meeting. It's going to be held in August again up in Deer Valley. We're going to be moving back over to the lodges, which is going to be a little bit bigger because we are expecting a little bit bigger turnout this year. So we are going to be set for, it's going to be August 23rd, August 24th, and August 25th. We're still trying to get like ideas and different things set for the agenda, and there will be a save the date that will be coming out hopefully within the next week or so, maybe a couple weeks. So we'll let you guys know through the Google group and on the website when that's available to you. I know that a lot of our states especially will need as much time as they possibly can in order to be able to get that travel set, and vendors probably will have to have a little bit of approval also to make sure that they can get their people sent also over. So we'll get that out to you guys as soon as we can. If you have any questions about it, feel free to give me a call or you can email me, and I'll put my email address in the chat box for you guys in case you do need that. But as soon as that comes out, I'll make sure that you guys get notified.
Bridget, did you say the dates? Did I miss that?
I did. It's going to be August 23rd, 24th, and 25th, again, up in Deer Valley again.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anybody have any questions for me right now?
Yeah, this is Clay with the NEMSIS Tech. Maybe one just additional thought. We are as Bridget mentioned, we're working on an agenda, and that is going well. We are reaching out to some folks, including, for example, ET3, to see if they can actually have a presence in a work meeting during the implementation meeting in Park City. We're getting some feedback from someone. Can you identify who that is? Let's see. If you'd be so kind as to mute your phone, we're getting some feedback. We can hear a female voice speaking in the background from someone. If you feel like you have some topics that may be of interest or you'd like to hear discussed at the annual meeting, if you think there's something that would be worthy to bring to the group, please either email Julianne or myself with that idea. We'd love to entertain it and add it to the agenda. So that was my only comment. Thank you.
All right, if there aren't any other questions about the annual meeting, please look for information. Will be coming soon on that. So we'll make sure you've got lots of time to get approval to attend and to work that into your budget for this year. Next up on our list is Josh. Josh, are you with us this morning?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me, Julianne?
Yep, you sound great.
Okay, great. Just wanted to let everyone know that we are publishing a couple of new performance measures in the NEMSIS Performance Measures Project. They are Safety 01 and Safety 02. These measures have to do with the use or avoidance of use of lights and sirens during the response phase of the call and during the transport phase of the call. So those measures are being added into the web service and into the Tableau dashboard today. So over the next few hours, we'll complete acceptance testing, make sure all the data is looking good. So I didn't want to demonstrate them quite yet until we've had a chance to ensure that they're accurate in production. But those are going out today. You will see the documentation will be updated to add those 2 new measures once we've completed the acceptance testing. We still do have quite a bit of background noise from someone's connection. So double check. Oh, I think it just went quiet. Thank you. So that's the update there. If you're starting to explore using the Performance Measures web service, you'll see those 2 new measures available as something that you can grab benchmark data on. And if you use the Tableau dashboard on the NEMSIS website to look at the performance measures, you'll see them show up there over the next day or so. In the documentation, you will notice that we have indicated that we are transitioning to the NEMSQA specifications for these performance measures. We originally started with the EMS Compass specifications, and NEMSQA has made some tweaks to re-specify many of the measures that EMS Compass originally developed. And so in the documentation, we note where those changes have occurred or where they will occur in the future. So we will be re-implementing a couple of the existing performance measures that have already been deployed. And when we do that, some numbers will change a little bit, including historical numbers. So that's the performance measures API. Any questions there? Okay, well, Julianne, if it's all right, I'll move into the Schematron rules discussion.
Yep, that would be great.
Okay, great. Could I go ahead and share my screen? Give me just a second here. Okay, great. Should see a PowerPoint. So you may recall probably a few months ago, we asked on this call about a potential rewrite of the version 3.4 National Schematron rules. To give a little background, we have completed the Schematron rules for NEMSIS 3.5. We did that, of course, when we released the XSD. And when we developed the Schematron rules for 3.5, we implemented some changes that had been requested by the community in regards to the approach that we took with writing those rules. So even though the actual constraints themselves stay fairly much the same, the approach to the rules changed a little bit, and we asked whether we should go ahead and make some of those approach changes in the 3.4 national rules, and the consensus was to go ahead and do so. So we are preparing a rewrite of the 3.4 national schematron schemas, and we are pursuing these goals in that rewrite. One, to make the asserts more atomic. So in other words, in the current 3.4 schematron rules, you might have a single assert that lists out several data elements that may have been not filled out on a call based on the scenario. Now we're going to split that assert up into multiple asserts, and each assert would list just one of those data elements. So essentially there will be more failed asserts, but reporting the same information. So it's just restructuring those. There was also a goal to limit the asserts to national elements only. So we will be removing some asserts that pertain to non-national elements. Most of those are in the time sequencing section. There was also the decision to change errors to warnings except for software-caused issues. So and those represent things like when a not value was recorded, but the element was not nil, those kinds of things that were software-caused issues. Everything else that could be human-caused or user-caused is generally implemented as a warning. We're also rephrasing assert text to put the element that most likely needs to be addressed right at the beginning of the sentence of the text. And our final goal here with the 3.4 rewrite is to make sure that if a document passed schematron validation in the current 3.4 rules, then that same document will still pass validation in the new rules. There may be some changes to warnings, but it would still be considered valid under the new rules. So in other words, we would not introduce any new error messages or make any of the error tests more strict. Those are the goals that we've decided upon. There are a few others that we want to get your feedback on today regarding which way we should go. Generally speaking, this comes down to a question of should we try to keep this rewrite aligned as close as possible with the current 3.4 rules, or should we align this rewrite more with the 3.5 rules that are already out? And so here's a few questions we want to run through and get your feedback on. One is there are some cases where we increased sensitivity of some rules in the 3.5 schemas. So in other words, they will fire more often. And this is one example of those. In 3.4, we have a rule that says that the patient's home county should be recorded when a patient was treated and transported by the EMS unit. In 3.5, if we were to kind of back translate it to 3.4, essentially we're saying that the home county should be recorded when there was a patient who was treated. So in 3.4, only if they were treated and transported by this unit, but in 3.5, that warning is going to throw whenever they were treated, regardless of whether this unit transported. Again, this is a warning, but that's the change that was made in 3.5, and the question will be, should we backport that change to 3.4, or should we keep the new 3.4 rules consistent with the existing sensitivity of the 3.4 rules? I'm going to run through a few like this and then get your feedback on them. We have some rules where we increase specificity, or in other words, the rule will fire less often in 3.5 than it did in 3.4. One example is in 3.4 in the current rules, we say that age should be recorded whenever there's a patient. In 3.5, we say that age should be recorded whenever a patient was treated. So it's more specific and will fire less often. Again, the question will be, do we stay consistent with the existing 3.4 constraints, or do we lean more to the 3.5 constraints to shadow those? We also identified some new rules when we developed the 3.5 schemas. And here's one example. In 3.5, we've added a new warning that says that incident county should be recorded unless you were canceled. That rule doesn't exist in 3.4, but based on a review of the data dictionary, it's a warning that makes sense to have. Again, the question being, do we go ahead and introduce that rule in the new 3.4 rewrite, or do we try to keep the 3.4 rules as consistent as possible with their existing constraints? And finally, we changed assert IDs in 3.5. We went with numerical IDs. So for example, E058 would be rule number 58 in EMS data set. In 3.4, the IDs had more kind of business meaning in them. So for example, that same rule in 3.4 was labeled as consistency ePatient 07, ePatient 08. And so the question here being, should we keep those longer assert IDs like we did in the current 3.4 rules, or should we make that change to shorter assert IDs? Depending on the discussion, I'll have a follow-up question on that one. Okay, so I want to pause there for feedback and just get your thoughts, either on cases where a rule would fire more often if we were to move it more in line with 3.5 rules, cases where rules would fire less often if we were to move more in line with 3.5, and cases where we've introduced some new rules in 3.5, and then of course finally the assert ID question. So with those questions on the table, what are your thoughts and kind of overall leanings in terms of when we do this rewrite, do we try to stay as consistent as possible with the current 3.4 constraints, or do we try to be more aligned with the 3.5 constraints?
This is Samantha with ESO.
Yes.
I vote for being as consistent as possible with the existing 3.4.0 rules.
Okay, thank you,
And
Samantha.
This is Amber in Colorado. I think I second that. Rather than having to retrain all of our agencies again, I'd be happy to wait until we move to 3.5 to sort of get to that point.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So here the rules would be presented a little bit differently, but they would essentially be flagging the same issues that they were flagging before and not introducing any new things.
I was a little concerned when you said about the 3.4, you're going to take some things out of there. I'm not sure how many quality measures are relying on those that are that's not going to be there anymore. So I didn't know if any of these suggestions would affect that at all.
Yeah, there will be some errors turned down to warnings, but the rules would not necessarily be removed.
And the ones that you said you're going to take out the non-national ones.
Oh, yes, that's true. Right. So at the national level, of course, that'll have no impact since the national database never receives that data. But yeah, that was one of the requests that there was a lot of consensus about.
Okay, so the states are, I didn't know if any states had written their rules with that in mind, that, you know, the national's taking care of this, we don't need to put it in ours or something like that.
Right, they very well may have, and so that would represent something that a state would want to look at and say, oh, this got removed from the national file, we better add it to our state rules.
Yeah, Josh, and this is Clay. Maybe to speak to that a little bit, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, we've really only done this once before where we've attempted to improve an existing schematron file. Is there a change log that we plan to provide that if a state wants to look and ensure that, hey, we didn't do this rule because it was covered in the national schematron, will they be able to identify what those are?
Yeah, we do have a change log, and then with this particular change, since it's kind of a wholesale rewrite, I'll provide sort of a comparison sheet that will show, like, here's what the old rule was, and here's what the new rules are. Here's what got removed, here's what got turned down from error to warning. So it'll be a more extensive documentation in this case of what changed.
Thank you.
Josh, it's Mark Roberts. Is it broken and do we need to fix it, or is our energy better spent working on 3.5? I mean, a lot of states, I would imagine, have put rules in place to make up for deficiencies that maybe we're missing or things that were important to them. I'm just having a hard time trying to figure out where I'm going to come up with the extra time to be worried about 3.4 that's not broken or doesn't appear to be broken, while also trying to work on 3.5.
Yeah, good question. Clay, is there anything you would offer in terms of background on the decision?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think the reason why we chose to go ahead and do this is that when we chose to reopen the schematron file associated with 3.5, there had been so many comments that really spoke to making the warnings more usable among our providers, and so that they're not just passed over, but actually they're readable text, they're understandable. We're getting some feedback again. I think someone's traveling. If you could make sure that you have your phone on mute, that would be great. It sounds like someone's moving around in their house, so if you'd please mute. And then I think the other thing, Mark, that made us feel like we probably need to make the changes that with the recent changes to the versioning schedule, 3.4 will be open until 2023. So we figured if we could improve the experience for our providers, that it was worth the effort. But you're right, it will depend on the state and whether they feel like they're just moving to 3.5 or going to stay on 3.4 for an extended period of time.
Yeah, Clay, so when we were working on our state schematron, I had a kind of an eye-opening experience because we were instructed by Image Trend to not include any of the national elements within our state schematron because they were already covered, obviously, but within our rules, we had included them. So we did a bunch of cleanup at that time, so that we didn't have conflicting rules at a local level plus then the national. So, and I mean, I know that's what Image Trend instructed us to do, and I'm imagining that they probably told the other customers to do the same thing. Again, I mean, if you push it out, if there's a way we can ignore it, we probably will. I don't see us putting the effort towards it, but it may benefit a new, somebody new coming on. But again, how many people are going to come on new once 3.5 is out and go to 3.4, or are they just going to jump to 3.5? I mean, yeah,
it's a good comment. I think that's true. I mean, within a state, if they've really done a good job of like overlooking our kind of not mistakes, but maybe overreach, right? So you're right. There were, and you may remember Josh did a survey among many states trying to determine what was working and what was not working in regards to schematron. And one of the big ones was there was a lot of states that were doubling up on rules. And part of that was exactly what you're talking about, Mark. We had kind of extended our reach a little bit farther than we should have to elements that we don't even collect at the national level. And so I think states were double writing some rules for that reason. So yeah, it's kind of a cleanup, just kind of, it's like let's make this a little bit better. But you're right, if in California, if you feel stable and things are working the way you want and people are responding to their warnings, then you're good.
So I think these comments underscore that we should try to keep the new constraints aligned as closely as possible with the current 3.4 constraints. So we're going to be doing a re-architecture of how we put those rules together, splitting them out, making them more atomic, but essentially testing the same constraints that we tested before to the extent possible. And so then if we do that, this really limits the scope, for a state trying to figure out what changed, it really limits the scope down to just the fact that we're going to be removing some constraints that apply to non-national elements. Those would be the changes that a state would need to pay attention to, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree, Josh. I think that decision is made. We'll stay as close to 3.4 as we possibly can.
Yeah. Okay. And then, of course, keeping in mind with this goal that I listed at the bottom of this page, we're going to make sure that anything that passes the current schematron will also be valid according to the new schematron. So if, for instance, California decided to not deploy the new schematron, we could still guarantee that everything that they considered valid and sent to the national database will be considered valid by the national database, even though the national database will have deployed the new schematron rules. We'll make sure we guarantee that if it was valid in the old ones, it'll be valid in the new ones. Okay, so I want to specifically address this last question here I had about assert IDs. Are there any preferences among the people on the call as to whether we keep assert IDs in the new 3.4 rules kind of in this longer format that's sort of descriptive of what it covers, or do we switch them to go with this shorter numbered sequence kind of format more consistent with 3.5? I will say that if we change them to be more consistent with 3.5, we do have the opportunity to use the same number for rules that are exactly the same in the two versions of the standard. So that may help states and vendors as they move from 3.4 to 3.5 and try to understand which validation rules are changing, which ones are going away, which are being added, and which ones are remaining exactly the same between the two versions. So we can go either way here, the longer IDs or the shorter ones. I wanted to get some feedback on that.
Hey, Josh, it's Mark. I'd rather keep it with the long ones. We're all familiar with that, but that's just my input.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
Hey, Josh and everyone, Karen Jacobson here. Would it be possible to, I know the name is already long, but couldn't you just add the new one to the end of it? So then you would have both the history of the old and future identifier.
That's possible. Yeah, any thoughts on that from the rest of the group?
Something with this project. There's something different.
This is Samantha with DSO. I think that's a good thought for consistency across the standards. My concern with not using the existing long one is, if I understand correctly, you're going to be taking rules today that cover multiple elements. So just thinking about like the e-disposition consistency one, where it says, you know, you have to have these 10 elements. Does that mean that there's now going to be 10 new rules?
That's right. Yeah, and we'll have to make new IDs because there will be 10 asserts instead of 1 assert.
Right.
Let's see, let me bring up, here we go. Yeah, so for example, in this, this one that runs off of edisposition.12, there's a lot in here. This assert has this ID right here, but that assert is going to be broken out into, what, a dozen or so asserts. And so I'll have to do, you know, _1, _2, or else underscore and then the name of the element that it's applying to. Yeah, it'll have to be changed one way or another.
Right. So in that case, I think Karen's suggestion is probably the best way to go. Because I would like personally to keep that history of this is part of the e-disposition 12 consistency rule, and then kind of see all of the differences that came out of that.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So you would be able to tie back to, by seeing this part of the ID, you'd be able to tie back to see that all 12 of these rules were actually part of this one previous assert. And then by seeing underscore, you know, E058, E059, whatever, this rule matches up with this particular rule in 3.5. I will note, like in this case, since these are all based on incident patient disposition, these have all been replaced in 3.5, right? Because they're based on the 4 new data elements. So in that case, they'll have different IDs in 3.5. But yeah, we can kind of play around with some options there. But it sounds like so far people are indicating that their priority is to be able to understand how the new 3.4 rules, to keep them as consistent as possible with the current 3.4 rules, and be able to tie back and understand how they relate to each other.
Hi, this is Jim from Pro Phoenix. I agree. That longer syntax is still valuable.
Okay.
From the old format.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So
Josh,
yes.
There were a couple of comments on the chat feature.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, for some reason I can't. Oh, I finally got the chat to come up. I kept clicking the button, nothing happened. Okay. Let's see. Okay.
So from Chris and from Jay.
Yeah, so Jay was thinking from the opposite perspective. If we're moving to 3.5, I think we should work to adjust the latest version to the new data fields. Well, we can't adjust to new data fields. They don't exist in 3.4. But anyway, so Jay was voting for let's make it more consistent with 3.5. Chris Parkins from Esperonics said, to clarify, the name change is just to the assert in the rules, but the elements targeted would not have their names changed. That's correct. This is just the ID of the assert. So it doesn't have anything to do with what data elements are being checked. And okay. So anyone siding with Jay on making it more consistent with 3.5.
It's lonely out here in the West sometimes.
Okay, one more from David Saylor at Beyond Lucid. He just said he doesn't agree that NEMSIS overreached by including schematron rules for non-national elements. The NEMSIS TAC is the steward of the standard as a whole and can declare that certain combinations of elements are not valid. Okay, any final comments before we, well, I guess I'll summarize. So I think what we'll do here then is we'll, wherever sensitivity changed from 3.4 to 3.5, we're going to keep it in the 3, as it currently is in 3.4. Wherever specificity increased in 3.5, we're going to keep it as it is in 3.4. And wherever we added rules in 3.5, we're not going to add them in 3.4. And then the assert IDs, we will keep them consistent with the existing assert IDs. Obviously, they'll have to have something on the end of them. And so we may be able to use these numerical, the sequence-based approach from 3.5 as a suffix to these IDs. So we'll play around with an approach there. But overall, the goal being that you're able to tie back from a new 3.4 rule to where it was in the old 3.4 rules. Okay, any final comments or thoughts on this topic? Okay, great. Well, I appreciate everyone's contributions today to help us with these decisions.
Okay, I think next up is Laurel. Do you want the screen for this, Laurel?
Not yet. Maybe in a minute.
Okay.
I'm gonna go a little out of order on my 3 topics here. So I'm gonna start with the software compliance, just because it's timely. So I took a capture of our participants list at 10 after the hour. As we're going to be doing on these calls, I'm going to capture the list at 10 after the hour. If you are a vendor who joined after that point, and you have not already sent me a message in the chat, please do so that I can mark you down as present for this meeting. Just a reminder that it is 1 representative per company for call participation. So if your company is owned by a different company, that's fine. But if you're listed as separate companies on the NEMSIS website, then 1 person per separately listed company is what we're looking for there. If you have any questions about software compliance or maintenance, I'm happy to entertain them now. I did receive 1 question this week via email about recertification and what the timeline looks like for that. So to clarify, the recertification requirement as well as the attendance requirement will go into effect on January 1st of 2021. What that means is starting on that date, you will need to have recertified your product within 2 years. So on January 1st, 2021, if you have not recertified January 1st, 2019 or later, you will be out of compliance and you will be removed from the list until you can complete recertification. Likewise, if on January 1st, 2021, you do not have an attendance rate at these meetings of 70% or higher, you will be removed from the list. Similarly, on that date, if you did not attend the 2020 annual implementation meeting, you will be removed from the compliance list. If anyone has any questions, happy to answer them now.
Hi, Laurel. This is Karen Jacobson. I have a question.
Sure.
What are the ramifications to EMS agencies and states if compliance is removed?
So it would vary depending on your state for EMS agency software. We obviously can't control what files the state will accept. If you have a receive and process product that is not compliant, you, by our policy, would not be allowed to submit to the National Registry until you had reattained compliance.
Okay, thank you.
So I have another question about when will the attendance list of all the calls be available publicly? And the answer is right now. So I'm not tracking state attendance. I can't punish or reward state data managers for joining these calls, although we're very happy to have them. So I am capturing vendor attendance, and it is available on the website. I'm trying to take the screen share, but I'm technically impaired. There we go. Okay.
So I'm getting this error that I'm not a member of the team, and so
Okay, hold on. Google Chrome stopped working for me, so I gotta find the working browser today. Okay, so you should all see the NEMSIS website now.
Yeah, we see it, Laurel.
Excellent. I'm glad that worked. So if you go to technical resources and then compliant software testing status, this is where you see compliant vendors. And this is where you'll find their call participation rate. So on this page, you can pick the version you want to look at, 3.3.4, 3.4, 3.5. It defaults to 3.4 since that's where most of us are right now. You can scroll down and see all the compliant vendors, their recertification dates, and their call participation percentage. So it doesn't list who is on each call, but it does list what their percentage is at. So since we've had one call so far this year, you're either 100% or you're 0 right now. After today, probably change a little bit, but this is where you can track participation for vendors. So like I said, it's one representative per software company. So if your software company has a receive and process system for states, like, for example, Beyond Lucid, and you also have a process, a software product for agencies, then you only need to have one person on the call to represent all those products. So that's how that works right now. If there is a big request to publish full lists of participants, we can maybe look at finding a place for that on the website in the future. Let's see, is there anything else in the chat? I feel like there was. Yes. Brian, with regards to your question, can you send me an email and we can work that out? So are there any other questions on software compliance?
So you're going to be maintaining a whitelist of vendors based on e-record 01, is it? Or 02 or something?
I'm not sure how we're going to be enforcing that. I mean, obviously we can't control what agency software submits to states.
Yeah, that does. Yeah, sorry, Laurel. This is Clay. That does remain a little obtuse. Where because of the interest among state stakeholders to be more detailed with and more representative of compliance with the NEMSIS standard with these new requirements, as was discussed in the spring in Salt Lake City at the NHTSA meeting. These actions are based on those recommendations. I think NHTSA is still trying to figure out what happens when compliance is lost, right? So I think I know that Eric Cheney has taken that to the legal team there, and they're discussing that. We don't have final recommendations regarding this. It's been a lot kind of looser, I guess, in the past. I mean, we've just worked with states that have had issues that have dropped them out of compliance. So the one thing we know for sure is that based on what Laurel said, states would just be dropped, or products would be dropped off our list. How else that is publicized, or the ramifications of that, those are the questions that are under discussion at the legal side of NHTSA, as far as I understand.
Hey, Clay, it's Mark. Some counties, some agencies, some states may have in there that it's required that you be NEMSIS certified in order to be able to submit data. And so that could be something that would help facilitate people getting compliant. But also from a business standpoint, I would think that if your name comes off and you're in the middle of an RFP, you know, there could be some impact there as well. So I think the list being updated and as well as being accurate and representative of exactly where everybody is extremely important, especially if I'm getting ready to make a, you know, $2 million purchase. I want to make sure that the vendor that I'm selecting or considering has met all the compliance.
Okay, any final comments on compliance?
For the phone call participation, I guess, and there's a lot of zeros on the board. So since you're going to consider January 1st, 2021 as the cutoff there, if they're still at 0% in June, what's the point in leaving them on? Or is kind of what I'm thinking, or just kind of they can't mathematically get there at that point?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I did consider that. I don't know what will happen exactly on January 1st, 2021, because we've never really revoked anyone's compliance before. But, sorry. I think I'm going to leave people on until January 1st, 2021, because we're not putting the policies into effect until that date. So technically, they're still compliant, although they would come off on the 1st until they had recertified or regained the participation requirement or something like that. I think that that's something that we would need to address later. So I have a couple of people who've commented that I got their call percentage wrong. If that's the case, please either send me an email or send me a message. Send me an email and I can correct it after the call. I'm not perfect, and so I might have missed people. If you joined after the 10-minute mark on the last call, I might not have recorded you. But I'm happy to go correct those mistakes. I do keep the full participation list, so if you called in and I didn't recognize you because you were a phone number, then I can still verify that you were on that call. Another question: if company A is bought by company B, but company A still has a separate product, yeah. So if you're listed as separate companies, you need to have one person per company. So the example that I think everyone is thinking of here is that EMS Shirts and Golden Hour were purchased by Zoll. So as long as EMS and Golden Hour are listed as separate companies on the compliance testing list, they need to have separate representatives on the calls, if that answers the question.
Boo.
Sorry. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, on my list, you look like separate companies. So I don't know. Okay. Okay, it doesn't look like there are any more questions about compliance. Feel free to email me and complain if you don't like something I've done, and I will take your complaints and find you answers. This is new to us too. Okay, moving on to the next topic, which is the Microsoft software patches, I believe. So there was a bunch of really important Microsoft software patches that were released at the beginning of the week. And as you might have seen in the email that went out to the Google groups, we've asked everyone to implement them quickly, and we were also asked by NHTSA to implement them very quickly. As a result, there's going to be kind of a large sweeping downtime across the NEMSIS system from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Mountain Time tomorrow. So what this will look like is things at best will probably be entirely unavailable. Our expectation is that submissions, the website, Tableau reports, cubes, dashboards, scheduled emails, just basically everything NEMSIS TAC related will be offline during those hours tomorrow while we apply those patches. I know that it's a lot of work for everyone to turn off their submissions, and it's annoying that you can't reach us, but I sent everyone's contact information out over email to the Google group, so you should have it. If you have any questions, you can call or email us. We will be able to help you in those ways, and hopefully everything goes quickly and smoothly and we're back up and running without any issues. But the reason we're doing this is because our IT department was given a very strict turnaround schedule to implement these patches, and unfortunately we couldn't do it during the scheduled downtime window, which is the second Tuesday and Wednesday of every month. So we're doing it tomorrow and hoping that we can get it done as fast as possible. And I'll update the website with the 2020 scheduled downtimes, as that seems to have not yet been done. But it will always be the second Tuesday and Wednesday of the month. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, so I think my other topic was about demographic submissions to the NEMSIS TAC. That's my last one, right, Julianne?
That is your last one.
Okay, so just a reminder to everyone, the only way to submit files to the National Registry is via web services. You must submit your demographic file before you can send in EMS records. I don't know, is there any questions about file submissions to the TAC?
This is Karen Jacobson. Are there any issues that you are bringing this up again? I thought it was a known fact to everyone.
We have had some people who were confused about these items. So we're just making an announcement to remind everyone.
Gotcha. Thanks, Laurel.
Yep. All right, I think I'm done. If you have more questions for me, feel free to put them in the chat, shout them out, or send me an email. And I'm going to turn it over to whoever's next.
That would be me. Thank you, Laurel. The next item on our list is the 2019 data submission deadline. That is set for February 14th. We're looking at over 30 million records for 2019, which is fabulous. We appreciate your great support and all the hard work that you all have done to submit those records to the National EMS database. We are setting the deadline for 2019 in an effort to make sure that researchers and decision makers can have access to that wealth of information in a timely manner so that it's current information for them. We are aware that there are a few states that have 60-day leeway for their agencies to submit data, and that February 14th may not exactly fit in that 60 days for the end of December calls. So if you're in that situation, just let us know. We're already aware of Colorado and California are in that situation. So let us know on that. Otherwise, shoot for February 14th for the data submission deadline for all your 2019 records. Are there any questions for the data submission deadline? Excellent. Okay, so the next item up is our February training that's coming up. Let me pull over the training calendar. So February 4th, Laurel is going to talk to us about assessing ePCR vendor performance. So this will be at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. It's a Zoom conference call, so we'll be able to answer your questions, talk about different things that are of concern to you. These are very informal, and so if you have specific questions or issues, you're welcome to send those to me ahead of time or to send those to Laurel, and there usually is time during these public trainings to answer questions and go through some specific details if you have them. So that is our next public training coming up. And then our next item on the agenda is for Clay, final decisions on the national custom elements.
Yeah, thank you, Julianne. Folks will remember on the last call, we talked about this idea of folks with new federal requirements or federal projects have asked for ways to be able to make some modifications to the standard to meet those needs. We've talked about using the custom elements section for truly what would be called national custom elements, and I'll define that a little bit. We talked about maybe two types of situations where national public elements or national custom elements could be used. One, we just labeled as kind of supportive, to support the ET3 project. They're interested in adding some alternative locations to eDisposition 21 that could be tracked for that project so that they could properly reimburse EMS for those new alternate locations whereby they would be paid under that rule. So that idea was pretty easily resolved with the use of a custom element that could be applied to those to software that's being used by those agencies that are participating in the ET3 project. There'll just be a new folder in the state library that may, for example, be the ET3 folder, something like that. So in addition to the 56 states and territories, there would be additional, quote, folders in that library. The harder one to think about was this idea of kind of required changes that would have a national scope. So, for example, the last summer CMS approved decision that there are other types of providers that can sign a physician certification. So that would be a change to ePayment 05, adding 3 new types of professional. So clearly, we would want that to have national use. So does that are we kind of just really needing to do a critical patch or a new release of 3.4 to make that effective for 2020? We've made those changes to 3.5, but what do we do for 3.4? So we had a long discussion about that on the last call. We've held many other discussions internally here and also spoken to some federal folks, including our funders at NHTSA. The decision has been made not to do a critical release or a new build of 3.4.0, so that will remain the same. And that this request by CMS to add those additional providers to ePayment 05, that will also be a national custom element structure. We sent out that structure in December of 2019 to help folks prepare for the rollout of the CMS approval on 1/1 of 2020. But that was kind of a quick fix, and we were trying to decide whether to do a new build. But that we'll be also adding that now as a custom element, and there'll be another folder in that section as well in that state library that's related to national implementations. So that's where that change will be present and occur. We will be able to check to ensure that the custom element's been utilized. I think we have discovered with the work we've done with California that we're going to be making some changes to the test cases for compliance. And so we'll just ensure in the compliance test cases that we test to ensure that these changes have been made to ePayment 05 in that process. So that's how we'll help to kind of promote the implementation of that custom element across the nation. So I'll stop there just real quickly and ask if there are any questions related to those processes. Okay. If there are no questions, we are now working on the implementation of these new structures, and I would hope within the next couple of weeks we'll have we'll have these up and running. Probably by the next call, we'll introduce you to the new sites and take you there and show you how they will work. So I'll turn that time back over to you, Julianne.
All right, thank you, Clay. Next item on the agenda is Office of EMS, NHTSA. Eric, did you have anything that you'd like to share with the group today?
Julianne, I have nothing specific for the group. Unless they have questions for me, I'd be happy to address them.
Excellent. Well, that takes us straight into our open forum. So if anybody has questions for the TAC or for Eric, any questions or concerns, we're happy to discuss those now if you'd like to bring them up. Okay. As always, you are welcome to reach out to us, email or phone, with any questions or concerns that you have. We're happy to help in any way. Our next meeting will be February 12th, same time, same place. And please let us know if there's anything we can do to support you in the meantime. This recording will be up on the website within the next couple of days. So if nobody has any other issues or questions, we will go ahead and end the call for today. Thank you for participating.